I was Yasha, but Rico from Street Scores, and we're here to break down day, I guess, 11. I'm keeping my own track at this point because they've had like a couple of practices that we weren't there for. Then you have the joint practice that didn't technically count. So I'm just keeping track of all of the practices that have been open to at least the media members that do not involve a joint practice. So, and to my count, we're on day 11. Of course, we're coming with the clips and the analysis of everything that went down in practice today from what we know. Again, it's only media members allowed right now. Fans aren't even allowed to go, so we're not having as many updates as we were previously, but we still have some big-time updates. First of all, we have some huge injury updates, and Andrew Wiley and Derek Forrest returned the team drills today. That was a big positive, but we also have a couple of negatives on the injury report. Martavis Bryant was working out with the Commanders again. Ben said it looks like he's a star, and does Dan Quinn prefer Dyami Brown over Jahan Dotson? We're going to dive into all of that and more, but before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Again, anytime we get any information from these practices or anything going on with the Commanders, this is your one-stop shop. So we sign anybody, if we work somebody out, if we cut anybody, I got y'all. And I will be live streaming every preseason game, and I will be breaking down the upcoming Miami Dolphins joint practice as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that. I'm really excited. So much content on the way. But instead of wasting more of y'all time, let's go ahead and get to this video, man. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so before we actually get into practice, y'all already know we got to talk about a couple of things, most notably a roster move, well, a roster attempt, even though we didn't sign them. We'll talk about that, and also, of course, some things that Dan Quinn had to say before practice. He speaks before every practice, and there's usually always some type of important quotes that come from it, and so we're going to talk about all of that, and of course, I'm going to give you the big-time injury update. Then we're going to get to the actual practice. So first of all, today's practice was at 2 p.m., which was a little weird, and they were shells, but not like a fully padded practice type of situation. And there are no more fans allowed at any training camp practices from here on out. That is it. The only updates we'll be getting are from media members, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get to the point where even media members are not allowed at certain practices. So, you know, I'm going to try to keep y'all updated on everything that's going on when I can. I mean, all of this information, there was just such a lack of information from today's practice that I don't even really have much to say about the linebackers and the corners specifically today, and even really the running back. So I'm going to try to give y'all everything that I know of, that I found, but it's just not as much information coming out. But we still have enough to talk about this Commanders practice for a pretty long time. And then continuing on, again, practice at 2 p.m. today. Shouts out to Jayden Daniels MVP, because he said that we will more than likely have a practice tomorrow, as in Tuesday, August 13th as well, before they fly to Miami on Wednesday. And I'm assuming we're probably going to have a joint practice on Thursday against the Miami Dolphins, just like we did against the Jets last week. That was on Thursday. Now, roster move wise, even though we didn't officially sign them, it wasn't like an official roster move because it's going down tomorrow. But free agent wide receiver Martavis Bryant is working out for the Commanders on Tuesday, as in August 13th, tomorrow's practice. This will be the second visit in recent months with Washington. I do want to point that out. Like, this is his second time coming here in just a span of a couple of months with this regime. It's not like Martavis Bryant came here under the Ron Rivera regime, worked out, and it didn't work out, and then he came back with this regime. No, this is the second time since we've had Adam Peters as a general manager, Dan Quinn as a head coach, and Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator that he has come in and worked out for us. We'll see what happens and what comes from it. First of all, this feels like a kind of like a we have Brandon Ayuk at home situation. I'm not going to lie. And secondly, I'm pretty confident in my prediction that even if he does end up getting signed by the Commanders tomorrow after the workout, whatever, I'm pretty confident that he will not make the 53-man roster regardless. But who knows? Maybe the receivers after Terry, Jahan, Luke, and Dyami need to watch their backs. Maybe Olamide needs to watch his back. Bryson, Tremaine, Casimir, Allen, Jamison, Crowder. Maybe Martavis has a chance to basically usurp those guys as far as making this roster come out of nowhere and move them further down the depth chart. Who knows? Shouts out to Mitch Tisler, because he pointed out the fact that they could use a guy with his size at 6'4". It's just hard to know show what he has in the tank, being 32 years old and not having played in the NFL in 5 years. That's a great point. But I do want to emphasize his height, man. I really do, because after Luke McCaffrey, who's 6'2", then you have 6'4/6'5" Bryson Tremaine, and then you also have Martavis Bryant, who is also 6'4". So if you were to bring him in, does that mean Bryson Tremaine is like for sure not making the roster? Because I already thought that it was difficult enough for us to keep even Bryson Tremaine without the presence of Martavis Bryant. But then if Bryson Tremaine isn't the only tall receiver on roster, and Martavis Bryant is looking good with the same height, more of a veteran. Bryson Tremaine has a higher ceiling. He provides you more long-term value because, again, Martavis Bryant is 32 and hasn't played in the NFL in a few years. But it definitely is not a great look for Bryson Tremaine. But I feel like he's been balling out in training camp. So maybe this is just some wide receiver depth outside of him. Maybe this is not Martavis Bryant stepping on Bryson Tremaine's toes just simply because of the fact that they're both tall receivers. We'll see, though. Also, shouts out to Resh Manuel, because always finding the deep connections. He said that of course there were ties to Dan Quinn because Martavis Bryant was with the Cowboys last year, but I don't think he played. But also, Martavis Bryant spent half a decade going up against assistant DBs coach William Gay in practice when they were both playing for the Steelers at the same time. That's an interesting connection I didn't even think about. So we'll see if those connections matter, and maybe if they're rooting for him to make the team, if they have enough sway to do so. We'll see. But don't hold your breath. If tomorrow's practice, Tuesday, August 13th practice, ends and we hear no news of Martavis Bryant getting signed, don't be surprised, because, again, we brought him in for a workout a couple of months ago and nothing came of that as well. And we don't even have like elite wide receiver depth or anything. So I don't know what may change this time around. I guess we'll see. Now let's move on to a big time injury update. First of all, Andrew Wiley. Before practice, Dan Quinn said that Andrew Wiley will be back this week. He's been out of practices for like the past week or two at this point, but hasn't participated in team drills for like the majority of practice, and he's dealing with some tightness still. And then also you have rookie linebacker Jordan McGee, the 5th round pick that I'm very high on, that Frankie Louvu has spoken very highly of as well, multiple times so far in training camp, and has shined a lot in training camp and even showed some flashes in that preseason game, but he ended up getting hurt in that preseason game. He suffered a knee injury, and now we're just waiting for some testing to see how severe it is. Hopefully it's nothing major. Keep him in y'all thoughts, man. And then rookie quarterback Sam Hartman also got hurt in the preseason game. He hurt his shoulder. Now he's day-to-day, and he could likely end up missing the Dolphins game, Dan Quinn said. And same thing with Brandon Coleman, dealing with the shoulder injury, day-to-day, may miss the Dolphins game, the preseason game there. So if there's even a chance that they may miss the preseason game, it's quite likely we don't see Brandon Coleman against the Dolphins in that joint practice. So just yet another practice, yet another week of no Brandon Coleman at starting left tackle. At least Andrew Wiley's back. That's nice. Hopefully Samuel Cosmi is back, because we didn't get a Samuel Cosmi update. I'm assuming he should be back sooner rather than later, because he's not dealing with injury. He was dealing with like a illness situation, and he probably only didn't play in the preseason game just for the same reason that certain veterans like Bobby Wagner didn't play, where they're not dealing with injuries, but it's just kind of like, we don't really need you out there. And then defensive tackle Johnny Newton, the rookie, is dealing with a soft tissue injury. And y'all, man, I don't know about y'all, I hear soft tissue injury and I get scared. That scares me every time. Soft tissue injuries are always the scariest ones. Take it from me, as a Georgia Bulldog fan, those soft tissue injuries are always the ones that linger the longest. I'm definitely worried about that, but I don't think we should hit the panic button just yet. But that's an interesting situation. And Dan Quinn was asked about a setback for Johnny Newton. He said, quote, "Not a setback, because it wasn't related to where his injury was, but just a soft tissue part that just wasn't quite right. And so for he and Brandon Coleman and others, we're just going to make sure they're really right to go," unquote. So they're being extra cautious with these injuries, which I'm happy about, but I would really love to know exactly how hurt Johnny Newton is right now. And when talking about Brandon Coleman and Johnny Newton, he said, quote, "We won't know where Coleman and Johnny are until we get further along in the week. If they weren't able to practice, then we wouldn't play them. So I want to make sure getting the practice, getting the reps before we play those two," which just basically lets you know that if Johnny Newton and or Brandon Coleman do not practice leading up to the preseason game, do not expect to see them in that preseason game. They're not going to play them without them practicing. So maybe, just maybe, we'll see a little bit of them in the third preseason game, but I feel like that's going to be dominated by backups. I don't feel like we're going to see a lot of starters. So Brandon Coleman especially, we may never see him play a single snap in the entire preseason, just based off of what I'm looking at just moving forward. Also, in positive news, Derek Forrest, who has been dealing with a hamstring injury for like the past week or two, is finally participating in team drills. He participated in team drills earlier today in the Monday, August 12th practice for the first time in a while. It's been at least a week since I've heard of Derek Forrest participating in team drills. And just stick around when we get to the safety group, because you're going to like that update with what Derek Forrest did today, man, because even before he got hurt, he was out there with the third stringers. I mean, I feel like he was so far down the depth chart that he was in danger of not making his 53-man roster the way it was looking, and then getting hurt didn't help. But I've always said I believe in his talent. I feel like there's just no reason for him not to make the roster. I feel like he's too talented for that to happen. And then the play that he made today, we'll get there later. Stay tuned. Now, coaching-wise, before we get to the quarterbacks, and you know me, we're going to break down every position that we can. I don't have any real information on the running backs, linebackers, or corners, but every other position, we have some updates, and we have some specific examples of what happened in practice or random stats and things like that, so stay tuned. But before we get there, coaching wise, Dan Quinn said that today is Tell the Truth Monday with the players and the staff. They discuss what they learned from the preseason game, what they need to do heading into this week coming up. He said, there are things that we learned from rewatching the film on the Jets preseason opener, and that includes needing to work on tackling. So that's something that they're definitely going to emphasize moving forward leading up to this regular season. And then he also highlighted specific players from that Jets game, and he said Ben Sinnott, the tight end, safety Tyler Owens, my boy, and then running back Michael Wiley. And so you know I'm extra happy. We're going to talk about Ben Sinnott when we get to the tight ends. We're going to talk about Tyler Owens when we get to the safeties, and then we should definitely at least talk about Michael Wiley for a little bit with the running backs. Also, even though this is not something Dan Quinn said, I'm talking about this because I'm pretty sure this is a Dan Quinn thing. He is probably the reason that this is happening. But apparently the whole defensive sideline was running to the end zone, and even though it was a very short and quick practice today, he had those guys running. There was like a situation where Luke McCaffrey was running down the sideline, and even the defensive players on the sideline were running down after him. Ben Standig said on Twitter, there is chasing the ball on defense, and then there is everyone, including the entire sideline, racing down the field after the ball. Very high energy today. That's definitely a Dan Quinn thing. I love to hear something like that. That's so random. I'm not familiar with anybody ever. I've never really heard of that, and I love the fact that we're doing that. No breaks, man. Energy all the time. Even if you're on the sideline, man, stay in the zone. Now, moving on to the quarterbacks, of course, we're here to talk about Jayden Daniels. First of all, I don't know if y'all saw this graphic, man. I missed it during the game. I'm assuming they showed this during the game. But either way, there is a screenshot going around of Jayden Daniels compared to Aaron Rodgers. And look at this mess, man. What was the point of this? Like, why, man? Why QB comparison right here, man? Shouts out to Spectrum for this one. I don't know what's going on here, why they even felt the need to put this out. Like, thanks for showing the 17-year age difference. Thanks for the 19th season difference. Shouts out to all of the passing yards and passing touchdowns difference. Like, I don't know what I would have done without those statistics right there. Now, moving on, Dan Quinn before practice said that Jayden Daniels continues to check all of the things that they want him to, and he also added that they want to set him up for a remarkable career. Basically emphasized, we're not just trying to set him up for a good preseason or just a good rookie season. We're trying to set him up for a great career long term. So we're not being nearsighted. We're looking all the way down the road. What's our best case scenario and what are our best options and roads and pathways to where Jayden Daniels can lead us to Super Bowls and have a long Hall of Fame like career. And then also, just before we even get into what happened in practice, and it's only a couple of updates from Jayden Daniels, so this is not going to be a very long portion of the video, but before practice, you know, they're always doing their little drills and they kind of go back and forth. This one may not have necessarily been like a direct competition, but what you're about to see is Marcus Mariota doing the drill and then Jayden Daniels doing the drill afterwards, and there is a significant difference in the accuracy. And then again, we did not get a lot of updates at all today. I mean, the only real play that I heard about from Jayden Daniels was Zach Selby tweeting about how the first play of 11 on 11s, Jayden Daniels threw a pass to a wide open Zach Ertz, and it basically ended up gaining like 20 yards. But I guess this just goes to show we can further emphasize that Zach Ertz will be Jayden Daniels' favorite target. Versus the Jets in the joint practice, Zach Ertz was the one that got the first pass in 7-on-7s, and I believe he was the guy that was probably targeted the most. Remember in that joint practice as well, when they got to 11 on 11s, 4th and 10, he threw up a triple team contested throw to Zach Ertz, and Zach Ertz somehow came down with it. That is your strongest connection to Jayden Daniels right now. That is his safety blanket. That is his go-to target. That is everything's chaotic. My instant reflex in a panic situation is just, where's Zach Ertz? Let me get it to where he is. Pretty sure Terry McLaurin's going to have a great season. He's going to surpass 1,000 yards. Pretty sure a lot of our weapons are going to have great seasons. But Zach Ertz is the guy that's probably going to get the most targets just based off of, I mean, this is not the first, not even the second time I've heard this training camp that the first play of team drills, Jayden Daniels is looking towards Zach Ertz. That is a very, very consistent thing. Remember, Serge the Shooter even said like over a week ago that you may want to go ahead and get Zach Ertz in your fantasy drafts. It's that serious. Then shouts out to Brett Coleman, because even though this isn't just only about Jayden Daniels, but I thought this tweet was funny. He said, I think the 2022 quarterback class might have been a blood sacrifice that was made so that we could get the 2024 quarterback class. And basically because a lot of the people from the quarterback class, this most recent one, looked really good in their preseason debuts this past weekend. Bo Nix looked good at times. J.J. McCarthy looked good at times. Jayden Daniels looked fantastic in the very little we saw. Caleb Williams looked like what we expect Caleb Williams to look like. I thought that was pretty funny. Now moving on to the running backs. Again, I don't have much information outside of the fact that Dan Quinn went out of his way to highlight 3 players. Tight end Ben Sinnott, safety Tyler Owens, and running back Michael Wiley from that Jets preseason game. Michael Wiley did have a really good day. A really, really good day. And shouts out to Chris Russell, because after watching the Jets game, he tweeted that Michael Wiley also had some very impressive moments for the Commanders on Saturday. Before the touchdown that he even had, he had a 14-plus yard run on a 3rd and 2 to set up the eventual touchdown that he scored. So he helped himself out. He also had a great pickup in pass protection at some point as well. And he also ended up with a 69.3 overall grade, which is pretty good. That is an undrafted free agent that we may want to keep an eye on, that running back, because he's been popping a lot in practice. That is definitely somebody very notable that, hey, watch out, Chris Rodriguez and Jeremy McNichols. I'm just saying, watch out. Moving on to the wide receiver position. Before practice, Dan Quinn talked about Dyami Brown and said that he flashed in the spring and has continued into camp. And they clearly are basically pleased with where he's at on both offense and special teams. Quote, he's really going for it, unquote. So Dan Quinn has spoken very highly of Dyami Brown. But in contrast, when asked about Jahan Dotson, a completely different answer. When he was asked about why Jahan Dotson played the most wide receiver snaps in the preseason opener, which is very weird. That's not something typical. That's not what's supposed to happen. That's not how this is supposed to go. But when asked about Dyami Brown, you heard that answer. When asked about Jahan Dotson, he said, yeah, I think we're right in the middle of that competition. At receiver and trying to find out sliding inside and outside, so moving guys into different locations. Ben, that's a big piece of it. You'll see more of that this week as well with him and with some of the other receivers. We're really digging into that group, and it's a really competitive group to push it. So you'll see more of that game. It's more of the same with the reps increased again this week. Again, that came directly from Dan Quinn. But what I noticed is that when asked about Dyami Brown, he answered directly. Yeah, he's been doing this. He's been doing that. He's really been standing out. He's been working. He's flashed since spring. He's been flashing in training camp, and he flashed in the Jets preseason game. When asked about Jahan Dotson, he started to talk about everybody else, which seems to me just like how your parents tell you, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. It seems like he pretty much just ran around that question like a politician. Asked about Jahan Dotson specifically, started talking about wide receiver competition. Like, what happened? You did not answer our question directly right there. So I'm not speculating, because first of all, I bet big money that only that not only his roster spot is safe in Jahan Dotson, but I also believe that he's going to ball out for us. But I'm not going to lie, man. Shouts out to Ben Standard because he brings up a good point. Jahan Dotson played the most wide receiver snaps in the preseason opener, and that is very odd for a starter. Quinn said that the wide receiver room is competitive, and they are looking for guys at different spots. So maybe they just don't know where to put Jahan Dotson right now. Do we want him as a Z, as a slot, whatever? That's probably why he was out there the longest. But Burgundy Blog brings up a great point, and I completely agree. This is immediately what I thought when I saw the Dyami Brown and Jahan Dotson quotes and how just completely contrasting they are, just how different those quotes were. And he said, kind of seems like Dan Quinn might be feeling Dyami more than Jahan right now, which is a big turn of events. If you would have told me this a week ago, I would have been a little shocked because I've heard about Jahan Dotson making plays. I knew Dyami Brown was balling out, and I told y'all like a week or two ago, no, it was like 2 weeks ago, I did a video and the headline was literally Dyami Brown is a lock to make this roster because he's been balling out in preseason, throughout training camp, well, not preseason, he's been balling out all throughout training camp. He carried it into that preseason game as well with that deep bomb he caught from Jayden Daniels, even though he didn't get any separation on that play, but still great concentration on the back shoulder catch. You did what we needed you to do. You know, it would be nice if you could separate more, but you did what we needed you to do. But I've been talking about all offseason for the past few months that he's arguably our best blocking wide receiver, and I feel like he had a strong chance to make the roster just because of that just alone. And then on top of that, he's making plays like he's been making. So it's sounding like, I'm not going to speculate and say that Dyami Brown is behind Jahan, is ahead of Jahan Dotson on the depth chart because they didn't have him like that heading into that Jets joint practice. But I don't know, man. Dan Quinn at least seems a little partial towards Dyami Brown over a Jahan Dotson as of right now. He just talks about him differently. We'll see if it actually ends up mattering. I mean, at the end of the day, both of those guys are going to make the roster. Both of those guys are going to play on Sundays and catch passes from Jayden Daniels. The only debate is whether, like, Jahan is going to get more or Dyami Brown's going to get more, but none of these guys that we're talking about are in jeopardy of not making a 53-man roster. We know that for sure, but it's still just crazy because I thought Jahan Dotson was ready for his breakout year. From some of the clips I've been seeing in training camp, some of the things I've been hearing from reporters that have been going to training camp, it sounds like Jahan Dotson has had a good training camp. Maybe Dyami Brown's training camp has just been that much better. We'll see. Speaking of really good training camps, Olamide Zaccheaus, and I'm getting his name right, I'm getting it correctly, first attempts now, yeah, Olamide, yeah, yes sir. But Zach Selby after practice wrote in his article, another receiver who stood out was Olamide Zaccheaus, who had a solid game against the Jets with a 19-yard punt return and a 24-yard reception that was wiped away by a penalty. I remember that penalty too. That was definitely a fake penalty that the refs hated on that. I even booed them with my little boo the refs gif and things like that. But Zaccheaus finds a way to get open, creates separation from defensive backs, and knows how to get yards after the catch. He has gotten more reps as a returner as he is normally with the group of players catching punts. So this is a guy that, I mean, according to the preseason game, he's our starting punter. Maybe he has the leg up there. Maybe he's winning that battle as of right now. We'll see. And then he's also contributing as a wide receiver. He seems like a pretty deadly slot receiver right now. He's a veteran. This is not like some random undrafted free agent that we just brought in this offseason. This is not a draft pick. This is a guy that has made his way around the league a little bit. So we shouldn't be surprised that he's performing. But the level that he's performing at right now is a little surprising. Like, this guy seems like he's very likely to make the team. And now I'm just stuck questioning, is our receiving core that good? Or is our receiving core that bad to where Olamide just seems like he's one of the better receivers because our receiving core just isn't great? I don't know. I'm hoping it's the prior, but we'll see. Moving on to the tight end group. Again, Dan Quinn personally highlighted Ben Sinnott as one of the 3 players that stood out to him the most from that Jets preseason game. And just to let you know, Ben Sinnott versus the Jets, 3 catches, 57 yards, 41 yards after the catch, an 87.2 Pro Football Focus grade, but most importantly, the highest graded 2024 offensive draft pick in week 1 out of the entire NFL. Stop sleeping on my boy. I told y'all, Adam Peters said he reminds him of George Kittle. Who better than the guy that actually scouted, identified, and drafted George Kittle himself than Adam Peters? Chris Cooley, who played the tight end at a very high level in NFL. Literally said he looked like George Kittle. So when I say it, don't look at me crazy. I'm not saying that he is George Kittle, but he shows some George Kittle to him. And then also shouts out to Ben Sinnott because Kyle Brandt did his angry run segment, and Ben Sinnott was one of the, I believe 3 he did on Good Morning Football. He made sure he shouted out Ben Sinnott, showed the highlights and hyped him up like this is a strong guy right here. And I told y'all this months ago. Immediately after we drafted him, and I did my draft evaluation of him, though one of the main things I pointed out was the fact that this guy is going to be a huge yards after the catch guy, not because he's that fast, but because it's just really hard for people to tackle him. DBs are too small, even linebackers are too small and not strong enough, let alone even quick enough to get the right angle on them and things like that. You're going to see a lot of that from Ben Sinnott. Give him the ball 8 yards down the field, he makes it 15. Give him a 20-yard pass, he turns it into 42. Like, stop playing with my boy, man. Now moving on to the offensive line. Dan Quinn talked about the offensive line versus the Jets. He said they did a good job without Andrew Wiley and Brandon Coleman, and said that there are things that he definitely liked from those backups. Remember, Chris Paul had to start at right tackle in that Jets preseason game. I think Mason Brooks had to maybe start at right guard. I mean, it was all kinds of chaos going on with the lineups that we had to throw out there. It was really interesting. Dan Quinn also said that he liked what he saw specifically from the interior offensive line and thought that there was some good movement in the run game. And you can't lie, because even though they were going against Jets backups, that Jayden Daniels drive, we ran the ball way more than we threw it. I think Jayden Daniels only attempted 2 passes. 3. He attempted 3 because he had that one short one to Terry McLaurin. He had the deep bomb to Dyami, and before that, he missed the one on Austin Eckler. I'm still not absolutely sure whose fault that was that miscommunication or whatever. By the way, we did a whole touchdown drive from touchback to Jayden Daniels walking into the end zone, and we only attempted 3 passes, only completed 2 of them. The rest of it was a run game. That offensive line did a great job paving the way for those running backs. Brian Robinson was just churning out 5-6 yard carries just like it was nothing. Then Austin Eckler made some good plays in the red zone as well. And just speaking of Chris Paul versus the Jets, shouts out to Mason Kinahan for pointing this out. Out of 25 pass blocking snaps, he allowed 0 pressures, 0 hits, 0 sacks, and had an 84.3 pass blocking grade. His run blocking grade is why he, overall grade, he didn't look that great. And even when you watch the tape, he wasn't the best run blocker, especially when you ask him to move to the second level. I'm going to talk about that soon. But continuing Mason Kinahan's tweet, he said Paul played both right guard and right tackle and had some of the best games among the Commanders offensive linemen on Saturday. I would agree. But at the same time, again, go watch that tape, because on that Jayden Daniels deep bomb to Dyami Brown, it looked like he was getting beat. And he almost got Jayden Daniels' arm hit. Jayden Daniels had to throw the ball weird. Shouts out to him. That's something I should have pointed out in the breakdown of that preseason game, that he adjusted. He doesn't normally throw the ball like this. He had to go all the way up here because he saw Chris Paul getting beat. So shouts out to him for even making that adjustment. But again, Chris Paul almost was going to be the reason that play didn't happen. Now imagine the fallout from that. Now I'm not taking anything away from Chris Paul, because again, he looked really good in a lot of his other snaps. But just think about it. Jayden Daniels audibles from a play. The fact that the play worked, there are a lot of fans still going crazy about it and acting like he's he has too big of an ego, he's out of control and things like that. But the play worked. Now imagine if the play didn't work. He calls that audible, Chris Paul gets beat, and then his arm gets hit, it's an incompletion or even a fumble, and now people are looking at Jayden Daniels crazy for calling an audible on that play, and then it ended up not working out, because I believe the original play was a running play. He audible into a pass. He didn't just go from a pass to another pass. He went from a running play to a pass. Now imagine if he audibles to a pass and then he ends up fumbling or incomplete pass. You know how crazy he would look, especially to the fans that feel like he shouldn't have audible out of it, even though it worked. So Chris Paul, man, we need you to protect better, because this whole narrative around Jayden Daniels could be completely different right now. You just never know. And there was also a play where he was supposed to pull, which I alluded to just a couple of minutes ago, but he ended up basically tripping over himself, and then the running back got tackled way sooner than he should have. If Chris Paul were able to just move his feet correctly and not trip over himself and then seal off that defensive lineman or linebacker, whoever it was, the running back probably gets at least 5 yards. But because he trips over himself, the defender is basically unblocked, just literally literally has to just walk around Chris Paul, and he's able to make the stop on the running back. Again, not taking too much away from him, but I don't want to create this narrative like Chris Paul just had the perfect game. It was a really good game, but it wasn't the perfect game. And then also, I do want to remind you that Andrew Wiley participated in 11 on 11s today, and that's a big hooray. I know we're not necessarily the biggest Andrew Wiley fans in this fan base, but it's still nice to have him back at right tackle because it's better than having all of these backups. A guy like Chris Paul, who's basically a guard, I don't necessarily like him playing tackle that much. That's just an entirely too new of a position for him. I feel like if he practiced at and worked at being a right tackle extensively, maybe over the course of some weeks or some months, maybe he could turn into a pretty good one. But just going from guard to tackle immediately, I don't expect him to be I think, if anything, if we're using context, he did have a fantastic game under the fact that he's not a tackle and he had to step in at tackle out there with the first teamers and still looked at least that good. It wasn't perfect, but that's still very amazing what he did. But again, back to my point, we need Andrew Wiley out there, y'all. I know we aren't the biggest Andrew Wiley fans, but if you really go back and look at those last 7 to 8 games when he and Samuel Cosme finally got that chemistry down pat, Andrew Wiley was actually pretty solid. I'm not gonna lie, we want him starting at right tackle. I promise you, out of all of the guys we have on this roster, between Trent Scott, Cornelius Lucas, and all of these guys, you prefer Andrew Wiley. Let me let you know that right now. That's a pure fact. I'm telling you that. And then also, before we get in all the way into the defense, and specifically starting with the defensive line part of the defense, like I mentioned earlier, the defense had a lot of energy today. Again, there was a play where Luke McCaffrey was running with the ball, and even the defensive players on the sideline were running down after him, but just from out of bounds. It was just a lot of energy. You could tell that was a Dan Quinn-led thing. Now the defensive line, let's get to it. And we really only have Jayden Davis to really talk about here, but on Jayden Davis, Dan Quinn said that he could see his speed and physicality during the game with the Jets. I don't know why Jayden Davis played so much against the Jets. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. We'll see. But Jayden Davis, even after practice, when people started interviewing him, he said that he's putting in extra film study and working with both the linebacker and the defensive end rooms. So right now, this guy's all over the place. He's trying to learn 2 positions, improve at linebacker and learn edge rusher defensive end right now. And I really respect the work that he's putting in. I really, really do. And then shouts out to Zach Selby, because in his article breaking down practice after practice, he said, like Sennett's physicality, Jayden Davis's value might be best seen in games. And that's a good point. Jayden Davis may be one of those guys that doesn't necessarily look great in practice, but when it comes to games, he balls out, because he looked really good in that preseason game. I'm not gonna lie. And especially with the way that he looked good as a strong edge setting defensive end that's making run stops in the backfield for tackles for losses and things like that. That is like something I never saw happening for Jayden Davis, especially nowhere near this soon. You know, when in doubt, I was like, okay, he's making the move from will linebacker to outside linebacker edge rusher. You know, maybe he could follow in the footsteps of like a Dante Fowler with hopefully he could turn into like a Von Miller. Best case scenario. Von Miller type of guy. Pass rush upside on the field, 3rd and longs, obvious passing downs, using your elite athleticism, speed, and quickness to get to the quarterback. But nah, that guy went out there against the Jets and set the edge against offensive tackles that weigh probably 100 pounds more than him. So I'm very surprised by that. Continuing with what Zach Selby said, he said Davis has spent the better part of camp learning how to play as a defensive end, and while there have been some rough patches in that transition, he's also shown growth. That's very important. Quinn said Davis's speed stood out to him on Saturday, and that helped the former first-round pick rack up 4 tackles, including back-to-back stops in the first quarter, like I talked about with him, was setting the edge and stopping the run. Then linebacker-wise, again, we don't really have much to say, and even cornerback-wise, I don't have much to say, but shouts out to Chris Russell, because I'm completely 100% with him on this point with Emmanuel Forbes. I feel like some people are definitely overreacting on the Emmanuel Forbes situation. He tweeted after rewatching the game, Emmanuel Forbes was not awful on Sunday or even in the practice Thursday against the Jets. I completely agree. Everything has been blown out of proportion, but if you've been watching my videos, I've been saying that over and over again. He wasn't good enough, but in addition to a lack of physicality at the line of scrimmage / release, I often see a lack of vision and awareness and timing to find the football. That is a big problem. And I realize on this play, and he's showing the GIF when he says it, he does a great job, but that's not often. Even the big pass breakup up the sideline the other day, he could and should have been called for a flag, in my opinion. I am not giving up on him as many as you have, but he does have to get better. I'm 100%. He does need to be better. I'm not saying Emmanuel Forbes is good yet or anything like that, but a lot of people are saying trade him, cut him, and things like that. It's not that bad because he has shown flashes. And again, the whole Jets, the joint practice was a complete narrative because the Jets fans, again, the joint practice was in New Jersey for the Jets fans to see, no Commanders fans. They uploaded all of the footage of Garrett Wilson getting the better of Emmanuel Forbes, but none of the footage of Emmanuel Forbes getting the better of Garrett Wilson and even getting an interception on the day. So that narrative just got ran with that way. And then in the preseason game, if you actually go and look at the all 22, he definitely looked solid, at least for pretty much almost every rep outside of the touchdown that he allowed. But again, I want to emphasize the fact that the touchdown he allowed was really bad. I mean, you got to at least press him. You at least got to flip your hips sooner. You got to do something. And to get beat like that by a wide receiver that may not even necessarily make the roster, by a super backup quarterback, that's not good at all, Emmanuel Forbes. So you got to get better. I completely agree. He is not good right now, but he has shown flashes. He's not somebody that you need to give up on. But speaking of flashes, let's move on to my boy Tyler Owens. Now we're talking about the safeties again. Dan Quinn highlighted 3 players from the preseason game: tight end Ben Sinnott, running back Michael Wiley, and my boy that I've been trying to put y'all on to since March, safety Tyler Owens, man. And I'm loving the love that he's getting, man. Already did a full breakdown on him and like how he was everywhere. I mean, he was a free safety, he was in the box, he was an edge rusher, he was an outside corner even for one snap in the preseason. I did a full breakdown of that. If you want to go get those advanced stats and like me really in greater detail breaking down what Tyler Owens did against the Jets, I did that in my stock up and stock down video that I did yesterday. Well, technically, by the time y'all seeing this, I don't know when, but August 11th, Sunday, go check that out. But either way, my main reason of talking about him today is the fact that he not only did he get love from Dan Quinn, I'm starting to see around the internet that Tyler Owens is getting love from everybody. You have at Ace30_YT, and he did a whole YouTube compilation of Tyler Owens' snaps against the Jets and the plays that he made, not only on special teams, but on defense as well. And you can notice that in one of those clips, he's the single high free safety at one point. I believe they were running cover 3, but the fact that they trusted him to be the single high free safety, the guy that's the deepest, even, I mean, it kind of looked like eventually it turned into a cover 3, but at first, he was the only one like really far back, and that's insane trust. Even though it is a preseason game, that's a lot to ask of a guy, an undrafted free agent rookie. I mean, that's a lot. And then you even have at Jayden Daniels MVP saying Tyler Owens is going to be a superstar in this league. I got a really good feeling about him, and as much as I've talked about him the past few months and specifically the past few days, I mean, I don't feel like I need to read off his athletic profile anymore. Just know that he's one of the freakiest athletes in the NFL. We just got to see if he has everything from the neck up to where it matters, because I'm going to keep bringing it up. Sean Lee, the linebacker that used to play for the Cowboys, he was probably slower than any of y'all watching this video. But he made plays at linebacker because his processing, awareness, and instincts were just so on point that it didn't matter how slow he was. He would be there before a play could even happen. And so it doesn't matter if you run a 4-3 if you don't know what's going on. That guy that runs a 4-7 is going to beat you to the play and always make a play before you and look like the better player just because he's so much more instinctual, more aware, higher IQ, and things like that. Those are the things that we need Tyler Owens to gain, because all of the athleticism, I mean, you couldn't have made a guy better in the lab with his athletic profile, but we're waiting for him to gain the Sean Lee qualities, and that's what could turn him into a Pro Bowler. That's what I'm saying there. And then lastly, before we leave the safety position, like I alluded to before the intro, Derek Forrest had a good day today, man. He really made an impact. People were talking about, several reporters talked about how in his first practice today, after missing over a week worth of practices, I believe, he had a really good pass breakup on a Jayden Daniels throw to Jahan Dotson. And that's what I love to hear, man. I'm rooting for Derek Forrest. Again, I've never been rooting against. I feel like some people think that, but I've just been keeping it 100. I've been keeping it that wild with y'all, man. He was with the third stringers, then he got hurt. I don't know what y'all want me to say, but I'm definitely rooting for him to make this team because he showed those flashes in 2022, and you saw those again today in Monday's August 12th practice. Now let's move on to special teams. Dan Quinn said that the team made a big deal of Tressway's tackle against the Jets. Man, I love that tackle. I wish I could show y'all the tackle in this video, but I know the NFL would copyright it, but man, I love that tackle. It wasn't just the tackle though. Quinn was really taken with the player's reaction on the sideline. He said, quote, "I thought it was a pretty cool statement for who he is as a teammate as well," unquote. The fact that the team rallied behind him like that after he made that tackle, that was phenomenal. Again, I personally feel like he shouldn't have necessarily put himself in harm's way like that because it's just a preseason, but that's the type of tackle, that's the type of play you make, and it galvanizes the entire team. I don't know if y'all have seen it yet, but the team was hyped like he just won the Super Bowl for him after he made that tackle, and I love that energy, and I love that love for Tressway specifically, man. Also, punt return wise today, you had Jamison Crowder, Kazma Allen, Davion Davis, Olamide Zaccheaus, haha, I'm on it now, and Jahan Dotson. So those are probably your leading punt returners right now. No Mike Sanford still in there. No Emmanuel Forbes, so maybe we're done with that. Those experiments there. Even though Mike Sanford still could be a very good returner, it's just not worth putting them in harm's way like that. He's already your starting slot corner already today. Before we even go week one into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers practice, he's already a starter. He's that good. Also, shouts out to Sam Fortier because he tweeted, Nikki Javala tweeted something similar basically, and they're talking about how it's really hard to overstate how tough it is to watch the Commanders kickers right now. They are terrible. It sounds like it's only getting worse from what I'm hearing. JP Finley tweeted, "This kicking situation is a problem. Ahmed was inaccurate and Patterson just rocked the goalpost so hard it was wobbling around. Then right after that, just a few minutes later, just literally 1 minute later, Patterson just hit the goalpost again. He's now hit the goalpost in at least twice in 5 attempts. That is insane. That is absolutely terrible. Like I said, after he hit the goalpost against the Jets, you can't be bad and have bad luck. Because my point is, hitting the goalpost, it's really hard to do that on purpose. Like, I'm pretty sure if you wanted him to hit the goalpost, he couldn't. So not only are you that bad that you're missing kicks, but then you also have bad luck because you're doing something that you can't even do if you really wanted to and really tried to do. So yeah, you're done. Ramiz Ahmed, you should not be our kicker going into the regular season as well. Like I said, we're just going to keep trotting those guys out there and just praying that they get better. But at the end of the day, we're just waiting on one of these way better kickers that are available out there to get cut from these other teams, because a lot of teams out there have 2 kickers. Some teams even have 3. And I'm willing to bet that we can take a gamble on any of those guys and they'll be better than the 2 guys that we have right now. We have the worst kicker room in the NFL, I'm pretty sure, by far. And hey, man, once teams cut their rosters down to 53 and they only keep 1 kicker, we'll be able to scoop up somebody at least halfway decent, at least somewhat of an improvement from what we're dealing with right now. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, just to let y'all know, I don't know if y'all been keeping up with everything going around the NFL right now, and you know, this fairly relevant because we just dealt with the Jets for the past few days with the joint practice in the preseason game. But apparently all-pro pass rusher who came from the Eagles, Hassan Reddick, who was holding out, has informed the team that he wants to be traded. And it's just crazy because he just got traded to the Jets from the Eagles a few months ago for the same exact reason, that he wants his money. Shouts out to Serge the Shooter for pointing this out too. Reddick wants new money. Eagles sent him to New York. They knew what he wanted when they traded for him, and somehow now they are against the wall and might have to trade him as well. I mean, this is an insane situation. Shouts out to Louis Riddick for tweeting, requesting a trade after being traded because you requested a trade because you wanted to be paid. Fire emoji. I mean, this situation is absolutely insane. I feel sorry for the Jets. I don't know how they got themselves in the situation, but hey, man, I don't know how much money he's asking for, but I would love a high-end edge rusher. Because like I've been saying, we have good edge rusher depth. We'll see about the potential that Dorrance Armstrong has to him. Maybe Javonte John Baptiste has some ceiling to him as well. Maybe a little bit in KJ Henry. But really, we just have a bunch of decent, average, slightly above average edge rushers in this group. Again, Dorrance Armstrong, Javonte John Baptiste, fairly unproven. Maybe they have that ceiling that we're looking for, like a Brian Burns or a Micah Parsons. I wouldn't hold my breath for it. Or more specifically, a Hassan Reddick. That's what we're missing. We're missing a high-end, high-octane edge rusher. Right now, we don't have a Jonathan Allen or Deron Payne of edge rushers confirmed. Again, we got to see what Dorrance Armstrong brings to the table. We don't have a Terry McLaurin of edge rushers. We don't have a even like necessarily a Zach Ertz or what I'm predicting Jayden Daniels will be of edge rushers. We definitely don't have a Samuel Cosmi of edge rushers, a high-end potential Pro Bowl, maybe even all-pro talent at all. We have a lot of solid depth. We got that figured out. We're good to go. We have a solid rotation of guys to where no matter who's in the game, out of the top 4 or 5 guys we have out there, there's always at least somebody that isn't a liability. Right now, our edge rusher group is not a liability, but we also don't have any playmakers, and I am a little worried with how this secondary is shaping up, especially this outside cornerback position right now. I think we're going to need a pass rush, and it would be lovely to get a guy that's like a certified dominant pass rusher like Hassan Reddick. I don't know how much money he's asking for, but I'd personally give it to him. I don't know what the Jets may request in return, but it would have to be for something less than what they gave the Eagles to get him, because, I mean, at this point, it's just like taking the car off the lot. The second you do, it depreciates in value, so maybe we can get maybe a cheap deal there and then pay him whatever he wants. We got the cap space. We'll see. But, of course, let me know in the comment section how you feel about the Hassan Reddick situation. And while we're at it, that's the end of this video, man. Make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button. Sorry, I'm all over the place. I've been all over the place all day. I've been super busy, so that's why I'm so late coming out with this video. I apologize. Again, all over the place, so you gotta excuse me. But make sure y'all stiff arm that like button, the subscription button, and the bell next to that subscription button. Do not leave this video without leaving a like. Definitely let me know in the comment section how you feel about everything discussed in this video. The Dyami Brown versus Jahan Dotson thing right now. Martavis Bryant coming in for a workout. The injuries that we're dealing with, especially Brandon Coleman and Johnny Newton, maybe not even having a chance to participate in any preseason this offseason. Let me know how you feel about all of that. And also, of course, let me know how you feel about the Hassan Reddick situation. Do you feel like do you agree that Zach Ertz will be Jayden Daniels' favorite target this season? Let me know. And Ben Sinnott, is he ready to pop out and be a big star? Who do you have as our starting punt returner? Everything that I talk about in this video, let me know how you feel about all of that in the comment section. I really appreciate y'all. Stay tuned for more videos. I'm definitely coming out with one Tuesday, August 13th. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.